So if you've ever struggled to tell your story when it comes to especially your origin story or your hero's journey or the background behind something or why you do what you do with something, then the My Story Genie is absolutely going to help you with that. And I am going to share that with you right now. So, how does the My Story Genie work? Well, basically, it follows the hero's journey by extracting a whole bunch of information from you, by asking you questions, and helps build the story, and then it literally writes it for you. But the cool thing is that you can tell different types of stories. So, you can sell a funny, a serious, a heartfelt, inspirational, or cautionary tale. So, in this one, which I have already loaded in here, is telling the story of how I got fired from my job after moving out of a trailer park for 7 years. And I can use this, again, I can use the moral of this for pretty much any purpose that I want. But it's all aimed at my target audience of entrepreneurs. Who's the main character? What happened? When and where did it happen? Give the details and background. What was the turning point? What was the transformation? What was the result? What's the lesson everyone should take away? Then you can tell it the writing style you want, and then the perspective. So I can actually tell this about somebody else, or I can tell it about myself. So if this is about me, then I want to tell it in first person. If I'm telling a story trying to resonate with the reader, then I might do it in second person. And let's say I was telling a story about Stu, then I could do it in third person. So I'm going to do this in first person just to show you how this comes out. And it'll tell it a couple different ways. It'll do it formulaic or creative, but I want to show you how all these different variables make this so much better than depending on the chat GPT. It's night and day. Okay. So I won't do the whole thing, but I remember what that day like it was yesterday, the day that changed my life forever. It was June 2001. I was driving home from work, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'd just been fired from my job, and it felt like my entire world was crashing down around me. I had only just moved into a real house after living in a trailer park for 7 years, and I hadn't even made the first mortgage payment yet. The timing couldn't have been worse. I had been at odds with my boss over a policy regarding product returns, and it all came to a head when another employee who had a personal vendetta against me falsely accused me of disrespecting my boss. Now that's pretty dang good.
Hey,
That
Jim,
because
I love that. In fact, what if I didn't, though? What happens if you whack that button again?
well, I would go up and change something. So um let's change this to like National Enquirer, and I want to change this to third person and see if it'll tell it. And then I'm going to change this also from inspirational to cautionary. Okay. And I'll
Okay.
change this from me, Jim Edwards, to just Jim Edwards.
I don't think I've ever done cautionary. I should do that.
What's the worst thing that'll happen? You'll spend a wish, Stu.
Uh, yeah.
You get 200 a day. So let's see what it does. All right. So it was June 2001 when the unimaginable happened to Jim, just after he and his wife had moved into their first house after living in a trailer park for 7 years. Jim had just started to settle into his new home and hadn't even made the first house payment when he faced the shock of a sudden job termination. Despite being at work, Jim's boss and him had an agreement about refund policies. Later, an employee who didn't like Jim told the boss that Jim was in the back room flipping him off. It seemed that Jim's boss may have been jealous because everyone was calling the office to talk to Jim and not him, since they were both named Jim. So, right there in rush hour traffic, Jim's boss fired him over the phone on a Friday. By the way, side note, totally true. That was back when you paid by the minute. So, for yourself.
Ooh.
So, I literally paid to get fired.
Mm.
Um, Devastated, Jim went home and told his wife about the lost job. She was sympathetic, but told him he had 30 days to get his internet business off the ground or he'd have to go get a job at Lowe's. True story. Jesus,
Mm.
last thing ever needs to happen. Suddenly, Jim found himself working his butt off 18 hours a day, networked like crazy, lined up affiliates, blah, 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 within 2.5 hours. 2.5 years. So the lesson for all entrepreneurs is clear. When one door closes, another opens. It's up to you to seize the opportunity. Those are two totally different. I mean, it's the same story, but it's told totally different perspective.
Yeah.
If we were to change this to, I don't know what would happen if we changed it humorous, or funny, because it wasn't funny. But let's just see real quick. Um, and we'll change this to humorous too. I'm gonna see if they can find any humor in this because I might want to punch the genie if it makes fun of me. But let's see what it does. Um, so the key is whatever you feed into it. Fired from my job and still caught in rush hour traffic. My heart dropped as I listened to my boss say those harrowing words. To make matters worse, I just moved into a real house after years of living in a trailer park and hadn't even made the first payment yet. Talk about timing, am I right? In a daze, I told my wife the bad news. Um, I told my wife the bad news and braced myself for disappointment, but instead she gave me an ultimatum. Blah, blah, blah. No pressure or anything, I thought sarcastically. So I worked my butt off 18 hours a day. I was like a caffeine infused energizer bunny. It made my mission to network and line up affiliates like it was going out of style, or I made it my mission. I even got a part time job to replace my full time income within those 30 days. I replaced my entire income. Okay.
I
So
like
that's a
it.
little bit different. I don't know why the
It's
hell
hard to make a joke about that one, but it did a pretty good job for a
it,
machine.
it did. And so my point is that I don't know what that message was it was giving me, but that right there, what we're after and what this does a great job of is giving you that first draft. So it gets all the parts, puts them all in, then you can tinker with all the different toggle switches and it will spit out the same story, but with all kinds of different spins and all kinds of different angles and language and stuff. So you can dial it in for your purpose. There's a genie for that. There's a genie for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Genie, genie.